A possible late-night curfew and a partial ban on alcohol sales expected to be announced tonight when the President addresses the nation. These measures would aim to curb the spread of coronavirus infections in so-called hotspots, particularly in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro and the Garden Route, both are currently the epicenter of a new outbreak of the virus. But with any stricter lockdown measures comes huge risk to the economy. Cas Coovadia is with Business Unity South Africa. Sanusha Naidu is a senior research associate at the Institute of Global Dialogue. Both join me as we lead lunchtime with this story. Cas Coovadia, to you first of all. There's no doubt, if you look at the new figures, that the President needs to act. But with whatever he decides to do comes a fair degree of risk to the economy.
It comes with a substantial degree of risk to the economy. We recognize that there is a surge in Eastern Cape, parts of Western Cape. We recognize that some sort of intervention needs to be made. What we would urge is that the intervention is targeted, that we are currently, in fact, meeting with some of the industries that are at play here, particularly the liquor industry, the tourism and hospitality industry, and we are talking to them about what measures they can put into place to mitigate some of the risks related to the businesses that they are involved in. We certainly are clear that while targeted interventions need to be made, that we should not be going into any higher levels of lockdown. I think we need to remain at the lockdown 1 like we are on at the moment. Going on to higher levels of lockdown will have a significantly bad impact on the economy, but we do recognize some sort of targeted interventions need to be made. But I think that we need to try and limit the damage, further damage to the economy as much as we can.
Cas Coovadia, I'm coming back to you in just a moment. Sanusha Naidu, good afternoon to you. The word that Cas Coovadia is using is targeted. No doubt the President is going to have to take a tougher stance when he talks to the nation at 8 o'clock tonight. But again, in many respects, a lot of Hobson's choice.
Absolutely, and good afternoon to you and to Cas and the viewers. It's such a difficult position because, I mean, you want to be able to say that this targeted intervention will work. And it will work because people will take responsibility and people will basically say, we understand the acute and chronic nature of this virus. We understand that we need to be much more vigilant in the interventions we carry out at a personal level. Simple things like washing your hand, basically making sure that you wear a mask, and all of those things that are quite simple but that have an effective impact in terms of the way in which you can curb the spread. Unfortunately, I think that the minimalist lockdown levels has created a kind of psyche in the minds of people to say, well, I'm not at risk, I can go out, this is summer, I need to be out, I can't be in lockdown mode all the time. And of course, if we don't actually take the lessons that we are seeing happening in other parts of the world, I mean, let's not only look at the northern hemisphere, let's look at what's happening in Asia as well, places like Singapore and elsewhere where the resurgence is happening, Hong Kong and so forth. And I think what is important here is how do we reconcile the fact that where these targeted interventions will need to take place are essentially where there is a high level of labor intensity. People who are workers, who basically work in the labor intensive section of the economy, who are going to be at risk. And if there's going to be targeted interventions, I'm not sure what the methodology or intervention will look like unless you start to say to people, only on certain days will you be able to travel. I mean, you don't want to become draconian in the interventions because you understand that the economy needs to function. But the problem here is when you move, the virus moves, which is a lovely quote by Professor Abdul Karim, sorry. And I think the problem here is how do we use this time to try and rethink the way our economy functions, the structural dynamics of the economy, because of the way these labor-intensive issues go forward. And the last point I want to make here is the question around healthcare workers again, because they then are at the front line and they are at risk even more.
Cas Coovadia, if we've all agreed on the fact that targeted intervention is going to be the theme tonight, is business in South Africa making specific recommendations in that respect?
Yeah, so as I said, Jeremy, we actually have meetings today with the relevant sectors. We've been meeting in the last couple of days under the auspices of NEDLAC. Both the liquor industry as well as the tourism and hospitality industry are putting together plans on how they can mitigate some of the risks associated with the abuse of liquor, associated with the very nature of the tourism and hospitality industry. We also are meeting tomorrow, actually, with net joints, which is the National Joint Committee, which actually looks at the agenda of the NCCC to actually put to them some thinking on how we can mitigate the risks. So these discussions are ongoing in the next couple of days. We hope that the President will take into account these discussions and what business puts on the table to the net joints, and that together we can actually work through how best to intervene and again, balance lives and livelihoods.
And in that respect, Sanusha Naidu, he's also going to have to toe the line. He's going to have to tread carefully when it comes to provincial politicians. For instance, the Western Cape Premier has openly called for targeted interventions and not an increase up the lockdown ladder.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think he's going to have to talk to the provincial premiers, obviously. We would agree with the Western Cape Premier. We don't think a harder lockdown now is going to actually resolve the issue about a surge. I think we need to intensify our promotion and communication efforts in meeting health protocols. We need to intensify communication around washing of hands and sanitation, not gathering and so on, and try to enforce that far more effectively. Right. I don't think a harder lockdown is going to actually make a significant impact on the surge. I think that people, let's be realistic about this. A lot of the people that are in these industries are living in areas where lockdowns do not have a significant impact. Right. Social distancing is difficult. So I think that let's try to keep as many people as possible in work where they can sanitize, where workplaces can be organized to ensure social distancing, and let's work together to see how we can actually promote a more seriousness in the public to actually meet the necessary health protocols.
Cas Coovadia from Business Unity South Africa, I will thank you and leave you at that point. I will bring Sanusha Naidu back into the conversation. There is a degree of political tightrope walking here.
Absolutely, Jeremy. And I think to pick up on what Cas was saying in the end, we talk about people performing and taking on responsibility, but in the workplace is one space. It's one space where you can actually apply these kinds of very important interventions. But you're actually asking people to use taxis, you're asking people to go back to their crowded spaces, and in those crowded spaces or where their living conditions are inhabitable at times, how do you actually enable or allow or actually monitor how people are actually social distancing? And I'm not sure what the answer is, because I think the question here for me to both business, government, and of course civil society communities, groups rather, is how do you redefine a united democratic front around the coronavirus? Because it's really about having a much more interventionist approach in terms of all three stakeholders, or all four, all five, whoever the stakeholders are, need to come back. And the political tightrope you're talking about is that people in communities actually need to be much more clear about the fact that it's not about a political party and whether you're voting for that political party or get them to come to register to vote for 2021. The bigger question here is that the coronavirus is going to, we have to coexist with it. And the political tightrope that the president is walking right now is that he's just managed to stave off a vote of no confidence or a motion of no confidence in the parliament because of the legal dynamic around that. But he still has a whole lot of other political dynamics nipping at his feet. And I think to talk to provinces again is going to be a big issue, because we're looking at that issue of the intra-party state question around political dynamics and fragmentation and factionalism that's taking place. And this coming weekend on the NEC meeting, these are the issues that are going to be there. And I wonder to what extent the coronavirus and the second wave or this resurgence will actually say to those individuals in the NEC and in other political parties, you know what? We have nothing to lose, because trying to capture power in the party will be meaningless if the infection rises again.
The speech is at 8 o'clock tonight. It will be carried live on the channel, and I thank Sanusha Naidu, Senior Research Associate at the Institute of Global Dialogue.